This is Chris Kell with your Peak Trainer 1 program design for the general population. Now, in our last module, Anatomy of a Training Session, we talked a lot about developing a standard model for training clients of all types. 95% of your clients, or we'll say 85 to 95% of your clients, are going to be from what we call the general population. Okay, and these are your soccer moms that come in. These are your older clients. Really, anybody that is not playing a sport or training for a specific application, such as a pro athlete or somebody of that nature, would fall into this category. So what we want to do with this presentation is give you a standard operating protocol for how to recognize clients of various levels and progress them as such. Now, the objectives of this presentation are to give you a model of where to start, with somebody that's just starting to train. The biggest question that I always had as a new trainer is, I have somebody that comes in as a 55-year-old guy, wants to lose body fat. What is the difference between him versus maybe a 45-year-old soccer mom, based upon all these assessments and everything else that we go through? So this is my model. This is something that we've developed over many years of training, and something that I use with every client that I train from this population. Okay, and this is the majority of my clients. It's something that I can manipulate for clients of various experience levels to always keep things fresh and interesting. You might have your model, you might have something that you develop over time, but this gives you a place to start, and it's something that we believe in. So we talk about how to understand clients of various levels and how to adapt to the client as they progress. Now, another definition of beginner, and something that I think we put to the side a lot, is that not only are beginners going to be physically deconditioned, but they're also mentally deconditioned. All right, we see Richard Simmons here on the right doing the wave with a bunch of random people, and one of the reasons that Richard Simmons, I think, was so successful in his career, and literally helped thousands or millions of people achieve fitness and lose body fat, is that he was interesting. Okay, he was a very interesting character. He always kept people on their feet, moving around. He was very excited, and if you look at him there, I mean, he's got the Daisy Dukes on. He's in the tank top. I mean, he's wearing the full regalia, and I think that a lot of people perceive personal trainers that way. Okay, they think that you're somebody that's going to be up all the time and motivating them, and that's true. But more than that, our goal is to provide our client structure, and really throughout this presentation, that has been the consistent theme: is that we don't just want to get the person on their feet and kick their butt during a workout. We want to help them to take this stuff into their life so they can be successful. And for beginner, this just doesn't exist oftentimes. All right, not only they've never really done exercise before or had physical structure, but their situation is not really set up for success. So they have a crappy schedule. They're probably not getting sleep, diet, lack of a diet or lack of a structured routine, and then the way they perceive fitness is that it sucks, that they have to go to the gym for 60 minutes, and all of those things that we talked about are not necessarily the case. So our whole goal with this, in training the general population, in my opinion, is it's the 80-20 rule. 80% of your work with the general population is going to be based upon helping to coach them through these habits. The remaining 20% is what we're talking about today: program design, getting them stronger, and everything else. But in reality, it's a very small piece of the puzzle. So when we look at program design with this in mind, with the personal training client versus the athlete, all right, when we're training an athlete, this is somebody that already has built-in drive and motivation. Okay, they're motivated. They have multiple forms of accountability, from their teammates to their coach. The fact that they need to win their games, or that is their accountability, and it is a scheduled season. All right, they've already have a very structured goal-setting schedule. Okay, and that's something that we want for our personal training clients. They also have immediate incentive to participate. All right, not looking stupid is a huge incentive. Okay, or achieving something by winning their games or winning a championship or whatever it may be. So with the athlete that comes in to train with you, that they know exactly what it is that motivates them. All right, some are going to be more motivated than others, but on the other hand, you can light that fire by just repeating what their coach is repeating. You know why they're there, and so do they. So with this person, we assume that to some degree they already have that built-in drive. So the goal with an athlete is to prepare them for what they're doing. All right, and from a physical standpoint, that's also going to drive program design. We want to accumulate as much stress as possible to build towards their goal. Okay, and an example would be with a football player that's preparing for a season, we want to make them as strong as possible during part of their program, so then we can work on, getting that power to transfer onto the field and making them as powerful as possible to explode on day one of their season. Generally, this athletes are going to have a higher pain tolerance and work capacity. They're doing their sports practice. They already have that built-in tolerance, so we can push them a lot harder. And then we hold athletes to specific strength standards, all right? And as they progress, we make the training more complex, okay? We use training to try to drive this intensity towards whatever they're trying to do. So the goal ultimately with this person is to pile on as much stuff as possible in order to get a training result, okay, versus the personal training client. All right, the big difference is that the personal training client doesn't really have those same systems. All right, we have to build this motivation and drive. We have to build this accountability, and we have to build these incentives to participate. So there's not necessarily this huge drive or honest to push themselves very hard in the gym. All right, part of our job really as a personal trainer, unfortunately, is to get them to push themselves harder. Okay, and that's with everybody that we train, but certainly we have to build these systems for them or help them to develop these things and develop that intrinsic motivation. So rather than pushing at 100% with our personal training clients all the time, we're trying to train them to meet basic needs around their lifestyle. All right, and this could be for a 55-year-old grandfather bending over to pick up his grandchild, or running with his his granddaughter without pain. Okay, it could be for a 35-year-old tennis player. It could just be simply improving her swing a little bit during her goals. So the goals are less specific. Okay, they're more based around the person's life, and it's not necessarily something where we're trying to linearly progress to get heavier with each session. All right, we want them to do that, but at the same time, we want to train around their lifestyle and around what they can do. Okay, so instead of specific standards, we use life standards. Okay, we use these basic lifts. With athletes, the more we get into their sport, the more specific we get in terms of conditioning, which exercises that we use. Whereas with personal training clients, we're looking at things like push-ups, squats, just these basic exercises that are going to allow them to just be stronger, be more functional in their daily life. And what that all boils down to is that we want to keep things as simple as possible with the personal training client. All right, the model that I'm going to give you may be a bit complex in the beginning, but when it boils down to it, it's just simple linear progression in the sense that we start by teaching technique, we add weight as we go along, and then we break things down, and with this one as well, some people will only get to a certain point on this model, and I want you to think about who you train and what these different modules that we talk about apply to. So the role of the trainer coach, all right, we talked about this 80-20 principle. With the athlete, you're pushing them as hard as you can. So 80% of your work is going to be physical. Whereas with the general population client, 80% of your work is going to be mental. All right, talking to them, taking time at the end of the session of the week to console them or to counsel them, to talk about what they did well that week, what habit we're working on, how their nutrition level was. All of that stuff with the personal training client from the general population is what will keep you in business. All right, it's the retention mechanism. It's selling our program as a long-term proposition versus the athlete whose program is based upon their season. All right, it's already spelled out. We know why we're there, and so we train that. But this is the big difference. And while we want to train all of our general population clients to be athletes, and I really do believe that everybody's an athlete to some degree, we have to realize the difference between the two. Okay, and that's going to be a big thing that drives everything that we do going forward. So starting points with a beginner, all right, and these are these are the things that we want to talk about with getting kind of the order of importance. All right, first and foremost, we want to have this short and long-term goal. Okay, so whereas the athlete already has this, with the beginner, we're building this system. So we sit down with the person. All right, we ask them, what is most important to you at this time. We talk about long-term goals, and then we break it down into specific 6 to 8 week mini goals. Okay. So the goal could be to run a 5K in 8 weeks. It could be to lose a dress size in 8 weeks. Whatever it may be, we get a specific commitment. And we also determine whether the goal is going to be aesthetic, meaning, fitting into a dress, something to do with weight loss, something that is physically, something that they want to do physically in terms of appearance, versus athletic, which is going to be, running your 5Ks, improving performance, maybe in getting more push-ups on day 30 than they did on day 1, whatever it may be. As I said before, I like athletic goals to begin with better, simply because we can get somebody into great shape without being necessarily having a great nutritional situation, whereas it's very hard to get somebody looking great when their diet is crappy. So start with athletic, I would say, with the majority of your clients. Just kind of figure out where they are along that continuum. And then next we want to understand what would disconnect them from training with us. Okay, we have their schedule, we have their personality type, we have challenges in nutrition and sleep. All of those things are potentially things that could cause them to reconsider their commitments and just feel deflated. So we want to talk to them beforehand and make a list. Okay, and what I tell people to do is I say, all right, I want you to sit down. I give them a piece of paper and I say, I want you to write down all of the things based upon your diet, your schedule, whatever is things that you feel that are constraining you from being successful currently. I want you to write those down now. Make a list, think of everything, and then as they're going along, I can kind of give them suggestions. But by the end of that, the person is going to self-identify what their limiting factors are. Based upon that list, we'll pick out one thing to work on. Okay, if sleep habits is their problem, or they say, okay, I'm not getting to sleep until 2 a.m., we want to figure out, okay, well, based upon that, then how would you feel about maybe doing 5 minutes of deep breathing before you go to sleep? Or what about getting to bed by 12 versus 2? All right, shrink down the change, make sure they're able to execute it, and it needs to be a 9 to 10 out of 10 in terms of their adherence. If you say, okay, I want you to go into sleep by 8 at night every night, I mean, that's going to be like a 3 out of 10 probably for somebody that's used to going to bed at 2. So make it very simple, and maybe for that person, the goal would be to move their bedtime back an hour every 2 weeks. Okay, so make it very doable and make it digestible. I like to focus, this is just a personal thing, but I like to focus more on just consistency habits, such as scheduling, sleep habits, and just getting that stuff out of the way before we start to touch nutrition, because in my experience, all of those things relate to their ability to execute clean eating or a more complex diet. So start with scheduling things. Start with just getting to the workout. Maybe sleep habits is another one. Whatever other things. Maybe a support system where we get them to start playing a sport, get them working out, and get them coming. And being able to perform as best as possible before we get into nutrition. Because that's going to be a longer list. And pick one thing at a time. That's what I would also say. If they can do it for 2 weeks, this one thing, check at the end of each week with them, have them log it, and we just go back and look, did you do this or not? Why or why not? And then once they do it, move on to the next thing. Okay, but those first 2 bullet points are by far the most important thing, all right? And then we move on to the physical part of it. So our assessment tells us where to start with basic body weight exercises, which we talked about, and then what not to do. Okay, so then we can start to construct our program. So solutions, okay, what do we want to do from a fitness standpoint with our personal training client? Number one is that I'm teaching them our basic routines. Okay, I'm teaching them the basic foam rolling and warm up routine. If applicable, I'm teaching them to log. So just the basic practices, all right, of what we do, and that is going to be a month, 2 months, whatever it takes. Some clients will learn quickly. Some clients will not learn quickly. But the point is, use basic repetitive things in the beginning in order to get them to buy in, or in order to just kind of hammer this stuff home. For fitness, we want to develop basic work capacity and strength and just keep things simple. Usually with our personal training clients, even in the beginning, if you just start with 3 exercises, upper body push, upper body pull, leg exercise, all right? Some people, you'll notice, get through the session much faster than other people who just lack that work capacity at the time. For some clients that I've had, the warm-up, the dynamic warm-up, and 3 strength exercises is all we get through. But if I notice that during their assessment, then I just put together their template that way, okay? And it's that simple. So we can increase training density, meaning more stuff in the workout, more circuits, etc., as the client improves their work capacity. So use the assessment kind of as a spot idea of how to do that, okay? And then we also talked about our goal setting. So based upon all of these things, these are the 4 blocks of training type, or the 4 program or phases of training that we use with our personal training clients. All right, and generally our personal training clients are starting with the technique phase. Technique phase is all about learning the basic practices that we just talked about. So we're teaching them new exercises. We're loading with very low rep ranges. You'll see down here in under set and rep range that it's 3 sets of 5. Again, I like that rep range because 5 reps is still enough to get a training effect, but it's generally not long enough for the form to break down. Okay, and we're training in the beginning for clients that have never strength trained before, haven't done so in a long time. Their body is not really able to gain muscle mass in the same way as somebody that's more experienced. All right, beginners are not able to recruit nearly as much muscle mass as our more experienced clients. So in the beginning, what we're really doing is just teaching movement patterns and making them, they will get stronger, but it's a neural adaptation, meaning the nervous system is quicker to adapt versus the muscles. So in the beginning, it doesn't really make sense to say, oh, we're going to do 12 reps of everything and get that pump. That's not really the goal at that time. It's just to load the software, really to focus on proper form and getting them doing the movements great. And what we use in this phase, rather than saying going to failure, trying to make things necessarily progressively heavier, we're going to go to what we call technical failure. I want, if I'm trying to teach movements and I'm kind of loading that software, when the person's movement starts to break down, then I'm going to stop them. Okay, if it's so in session 1, the person might do 3 sets of 5 push-ups. All right, the progression from there might be 3 sets of 7 push-ups. All right, because 7 would then be the number in which they broke down. If I can get them up to the number 12 or even 15 with proper form at a certain level, I know then that movement pattern exists and it's pretty stable. Then I can start to look at loading it up and going through these other phases. In terms of conditioning in this phase, oftentimes the session itself will be conditioning, but with some of our more in-shape clients, we like to incorporate time circuits. Okay, and time circuits are just where we say, all right, you're going to perform 3 exercises for 8 reps each. We're going to set a clock for 8 minutes, and you're going to perform these things back to back. For this 8-minute period. The idea is if I can get in 3 rounds in week 1, that's my baseline. But if I can get in 8 rounds in week 3, I'm in much better shape because I packed more work in the same amount of time. I like time circuits to begin with because they're self-selecting, meaning the client can rest whenever they want, they can get water whenever they want, but the onus is to push harder. Whereas with an interval, the problem with that is that the person may feel as if they need to keep going, at maximal pace for 90 seconds or whatever it is. So for clients that are not used to getting up to these high heart rates in the beginning, time circuits are going to be a much better gradual transition. And oftentimes for clients that we take through this technique phase, that's going to be the case. So the time circuit kind of acts as a bridge to interval training, which is the gold standard, and that's what we're looking to get our clients to. And generally, the technique phase could last anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks, as little as 2 weeks, just based upon the person. Okay, and that's going to be up to you. And I like to take the majority of my clients that start with me, whether or not they're new or not, through a short technique phase, just to kind of introduce new exercises. And this process can really be repeated. We start with body weight for true beginners, but even if it's somebody new, we start with maybe a week or 2 weeks of technique phase where we're working on, say, a bench press and a deadlift or something like that, where we just work on form and getting it in, and then we move on to these other phases. All right, so for our next phase, we have what we call anatomical adaptation. All right, anatomical adaptation simply means that we're preparing the body for heavier loading. For somebody that hasn't worked out in a long time, they're physically deconditioned, meaning their muscles have not really exerted the force necessary to lift very heavy or maximally heavy weight. The other thing that we have to consider is their ligaments and their connective tissue. Oftentimes people get strains and itises, and these structures are much slower to adapt than the muscles, so the change doesn't occur quite as quickly. What an anatomical adaptation phase does really is build muscular endurance. Okay, it prepares the body for more strenuous loading, and it gets the person in great shape. Okay, and that's what we're trying to do with anatomical adaptation. Generally, the idea is to just get this person in excellent shape, so when they develop a general base of fitness. Because once we get into our accumulate and our intensify phases, we're going to focus more on high intensity exercises. So this is when we're talking about the anatomical adaptation phase. We're talking about more moderate loads. All right, the goal is to increase loading via time, meaning I do more in the same amount of time, or and I'm using more moderate loads versus trying to add weight to every session. So with this is a traditional interval circuit. Okay, this is what we're talking about. Maybe we take 5 exercises and we have the client go back to back for 12 to 20 reps or 30 seconds. If your client's goal is a body composition one, all right, this is the phase that we would use. This is one where we build both cardiovascular and muscular endurance and fitness as well. So for a client that is looking to lose body fat, maybe you have them in this phase for 3 months or 2 months or whatever it may be. Generally, for those that we're just trying to get into general shape, this phase could be as little as 2 weeks. It could be as long as 6. It just depends on the person. So we're working on what we call endurance of the muscles, muscular endurance, or what we call peripheral endurance. So we're trying to improve the aerobic capacity of the muscles themselves. We also have what we call central endurance, or the cardiovascular system. With that, we're using interval training. Okay, so it's the same idea. We do intervals where we're doing push-ups and squats in order to increase the endurance of the muscles. Then we're also doing interval training on something like an Airdyne bike, where we go 30 seconds of moderate work to get the heart rate up, followed by 30 seconds of rest. We repeat that for 15 minutes. All right, that's working more on the cardiovascular system. So we have that kind of we work both in the same session. But again, we just make that distinction. The goal with our interval training in this phase, when we're doing conditioning, is that we want to move at moderate tempos. All right, we want to be moving more at an aerobic pace, and we want to be using easier exercises. Okay, so when I say easier, that's the difference between maybe like a slow, a moderate tempo squat versus a jump squat. All right, jump squat, explosive pace, moving as fast as we can. That's not necessarily the goal in this phase. The goal would be to move continuously, meaning I count to 2 on the way up, 2 on the way down, and I don't stop at either point. I just keep going. We also like to use longer intervals in this phase. I'll take my cardiovascular intervals up to 90 seconds here, just because it allows me to move at a more moderate pace and to get the heart rate up a little bit better. For those that have never really done interval training before, if you were to do a 30-second interval and expect them to get their heart rate up very high, that's not really going to happen. For complete beginners, I like these longer intervals because this moderate pace will allow a longer time to kind of ramp up that heart rate and a more gradual introduction into that. Then as we go along and we move into our accumulate and our intensify phases, they have kind of more of an idea of what it is to get their heart rate up at these longer intervals. So then we shorten them and we start to incorporate more intense exercises. So moving on to our accumulate phase, the goal during this phase would be muscular hypertrophy, okay, or for our female clients, muscular tone. With this phase, this is the first phase in which we're truly introducing heavier loads, okay, and what I mean that is, we're trying to progressively increase the weight. So we say the general guideline that I use is 3 sets of 6 to 8 reps, and it's pretty simple. The client isn't able to do 6 reps, we move the weight down. If they can do more than 8 reps, though, we increase the weight. The goal simply being to add maybe 2.5 to 5 pounds to the bar with each session. So now the system becomes progressive resistance. All right, load is the primary thing that we're looking to improve here. And now as well, we're starting to incorporate harder and easier intervals. In our last presentation, we talked about, doing maybe like 1 really hard explosive exercise followed by 3 easier exercises. And this is where we start to incorporate that, exercises with faster tempos and our shorter intervals. And a good example would be doing something like a really intense exercise like a burpee for 30 seconds of all-out work, all right? For a new client, that's going to get their heart rate up, and then we allow them to come down and recover by doing maybe 3 exercises that are easier in nature, so 30 seconds of like a glute bridge, a plank, and something else. All right, for that client, that is an anaerobic pace. It allows them to recover, though, so they can go hard. And then as the person gains capacity, as they become more accustomed to these exercises, then we can maybe start to incorporate 2 harder exercises where we do like a burpee and a medicine ball slam, and then we have just 2 recovery exercises. So that's kind of the little mini bridge that I like to use into our last phase. So for our last phase, we have the intensify phase. Okay, and the goal during this phase is to introduce what we call a maximal effort work. Maximal effort work simply means that the client is trying to increase their strength, okay? The maximum strength, the amount of weight that we can lift, all right? And this is truly strength-oriented loading in the sense that with our personal training clients, we're looking at 3 to 6 reps, all right? For your athletes, this is like the 1 rep max, the 2 rep max. I don't like to take it down that low for personal training clients. You know, we're looking maybe 3 to 6 reps, but at the same time, we are trying to increase strength. All right, that is the goal of this phase. That is the primary objective. Our main lifts are based upon strength, so we want to look at large multi-joint exercises such as squats, bench presses, things that we can maximally increase progressively. And the goal is the same as with the moderate loads. All right, if I can exceed that 6 rep number, I add weight. The goal for this phase is to simply add 2.5 to 5 pounds to the bar. As far as interval training goes, this is the phase in which we are doing our most intense interval training. Okay, and you'll notice that the interval training is alactic in nature. Okay, we're looking at maybe 10 seconds of hard work, and this duration of time also mimics the strength loading, because when you're lifting a heavy load, you know, we're looking at maybe 10 to 15 to 20 seconds maybe of extremely hard work, and that's it. So not a very long period of time, but very, very explosive and hard. All right, this is the time where we pull out our hardest exercise. We're trying to explode as much as possible. We're moving at explosive tempos at a very short amount of time, all right, because I can do a very, very explosive exercise over maybe 10 to 20 seconds, but then inevitably that's going to start to slow down, so I can't necessarily sustain that pace. So I want to pick things that are extremely explosive, and with this, I'm not using necessarily a circuit of exercises. I'm not doing a circuit of 5. I'm using maybe 1 to 2, where I go back to back and I explode. A popular interval protocol with this is a Tabata interval, where you're doing 20 seconds of very hard work followed by 10 seconds of rest, and that's not even truly explosive because the rest period is not long enough. If you wanted to modify that to make that a little bit more intense, I would go maybe 10 seconds of very hard work followed by 30 seconds of rest. Okay, that would allow for a little bit more of a true alactic contraction. But the point being is that the loads are very heavy and the intervals are very explosive in this phase. Beginning with our technique phase, we want to give our user share a basic idea of how each each phase functions. Now, with the technique phase, you'll notice that everything is 3 sets of 5. Okay, we're looking at 2 circuits, basic body weight exercises. All right, we're assuming that this is a beginner. Okay, this could be, if this is a more experienced client, this could be, it could be a bench press, it could be a front squat, it could be whatever it may be. But the idea is that we want to teach technique, and that is the focus of the session. Okay, we're not trying to make it heavier. We're not necessarily trying to get any other kind of training adaptation other than just getting the client to learn the right moves so they can be successful, and we can put intensity on top of that. So we have 2 circuits in this general phase. All right, assuming that this is a beginner, you'll also notice that I have 2 exercises for each circuit. This is assuming with a basic beginner, whereas we've talked about adding filler exercises, core exercises to allow for rest. Number one, the person isn't going to need that much rest in the very beginning, and chances are you're going to be taking more time to coach the person in each exercise. So we want to allow a maximal amount of time to do that. So I might actually, and if the actual act of doing 5 push-ups might last for 25 seconds, but the coaching aspect of it might last for 2 minutes. Who knows? But we're trying to save time by just looking at these 2. We want them to focus on these 2 things versus having other things kind of thrown in as well. So the focus of this session is going to be teaching, and whenever I'm doing that, I'm trying to keep things as basic and straightforward as possible. So this is more of a minimalist approach. For circuit 2, again, these are going to be more easier to understand, easier to coach exercises. Whereas with circuit 1, the client is going to be fresh. You want to put the most important things first always. Whereas with circuit 2, it might be a little bit more, I guess, more difficult in terms of their fatigue or whatever it may be. But with this approach, we have 4 exercises, so we still maintain a relatively high quality. Now, for our conditioning, you'll notice that we have a time circuit. Okay, again, I've chosen 2 exercises that they're performing back to back from 10 to 1 for 6 minutes, meaning they do 10 of each exercise. They start over, they do 9 of each exercise, and try to count down from 10 to 1 in a period of 6 minutes. So it's a very simple objective, very, very simple program. Simplicity rules the day in the beginning. As the person becomes more experienced, I can start to then add more complexity to the program. But in the very beginning, like this, I want to keep it very, very simple. Keep in mind, what you don't see with this program is that we're also doing a dynamic warm-up with them. So that's more stuff that they have to necessarily learn. So keep it very simple, 6 to 8 exercises maybe, and just very, very straightforward. Now, with anatomical adaptation, the difference with this one is that we only have one circuit. We're performing each exercise back to back for anywhere for either 12 to 20 reps or 30 to 60 seconds. All right, and the idea behind this is that we're trying to get a total body training effect here. We're placing more things back to back because the objective is to get the heart rate up and is, truthfully, to create some degree of muscular fatigue. So we have an upper body exercise followed by a lower body exercise followed by upper and then lower. And what this is doing from both a muscular and a cardiovascular standpoint is this is going, setting it up with this upper-lower idea is that's increasing blood flow throughout the body. So the client is improving blood circulation. It's a total body workout to improve cardiovascular endurance and to improve muscular endurance as well. So this is something that is building a general base of fitness, and just putting the client through this circuit is more of a boot camp style workout. All right, obviously that's not our goal. We're not putting this person in a fitness boot camp, but the objective of this program is fitness. So they go through these exercises. Generally, I like to put in the exercises that I'm then going to load up heavier, or some variation of that. So and maybe our next phase, the client was doing a push-up with a plate on their back, then I would have them doing just normal push-ups on the floor with just body weight. Okay, and as well, if the person maybe is doing a front squat, in the next phase, I'm having them do a goblet squat where they're holding a dumbbell out in front of them. All right, the other part of it with this, the thing that you have to watch out for with clients that are doing these types of workouts is moving like a bat out of hell. Okay, if you tell somebody that, okay, I want you to perform this exercise for 30 to 60 seconds, the natural objective is to just move as quickly as possible and try to get as much in as we can. That's not necessarily the goal, especially in the beginning. We want them to move at a moderate tempo. Okay, and what I like to do is ask them to count to 2 on the way up and 2 on the way down and just move continuously. Okay, so that eliminates this thing where it looks like we hook them up to a light socket and they're just kind of doing half reps. We want full ranges of motion. We want them moving at a good moderate pace, and that's going to build these aerobic heart rates, and it's going to ensure that we get the right training adaptation. Now, in terms of our conditioning, you'll notice that I've got 30 seconds of work followed by 30 seconds of rest for 6 minutes. Right, in this particular example, I'm using a medicine ball slam, but what I like better than that are things like running, if applicable. Okay, treadmill, using an Airdyne bike is great. Using maybe even a stair climber where it's continuous, and it's something that they're not able to break after 5 reps or whatever it may be, and that's going to be the major change from our circuit-based conditioning. Certainly, if you're using implements or physical exercises like the medicine ball slam, we want to use total body things. So I like medicine ball drills a lot. I like kettlebell swings. That's another one. Just things that involve movement of the entire body, the arms and the legs, and it allows more of a heart rate adaptation versus fatiguing out a certain area of the body. So that's why maybe push-ups wouldn't be the best choice for our conditioning versus conditioning the muscles. Okay, so medicine ball slams, total body movements is what we're looking for there. For our accumulate phase, now we're starting to increase training density, meaning we have an upper body, a lower body, and then some sort of a filler exercise. By now, the client should have a pretty good work capacity. We've built that through our anatomical adaptation phase. Now we're starting to get into true strength loading. So, for example, I did push-ups on the floor in the last phase with our client. Now we have rear foot elevated push-ups, where I'm asking them to put their feet on a step and do 8 reps by touching their chest to the floor. The goal now is to increase from to increase our weight with each session. So if they do over 8 reps, then we make it harder somehow. Then I would put a plate on his back, or I might have him raise one leg off the box, whatever applies to that person. And it's the same with the goblet split squat. Okay, I could start him with 30 pounds. The objective in 3 weeks is to get up to maybe 50 pounds or whatever it may be. So the load is what we're trying to do. Okay, in this sense, because we're lifting heavier weight and we're exerting ourselves more rest is going to be required. So now we're starting to incorporate our filler exercises. Okay, and with the push-up and the split squat, or really any exercise in our accumulate phase where we're trying to use more moderate loads, we're looking for anywhere from maybe 30 to 90 seconds of rest. So with that, I like one filler exercise because, we're holding the plank for 30 seconds and then it takes them another, 20 seconds or whatever to reset and get their feet back up on that box. So that's kind of how we set this particular phase up. Now for circuit 2, again, it's the same idea, 6 to 8 reps for each thing. So both circuits are going to share the same rep range. Just keep in mind that our first circuit is the one that we want to put the main exercise that we're trying to load in, because we're going to be fairly fatigued by circuit 2. There's not going to be that big of a difference yet in this phase, so it's not that big of a deal, but it starts to become more of a concern and something to think about. For conditioning, again, now we're getting more into what we call lactic conditioning or anaerobic interval training. All right, we have exercises like burpees and medicine ball slams and things that are performed at a more explosive tempo. And as I was talking about tempo in our last phase, where we give them a specific count, now with a burpee, I'm going to say do as many as possible. All right, move as quickly as you can. All right, you should be at the top of your ability. I want 9 to 10 out of 10. All right, they will do whatever you tell them to do. Okay, and with that, so say we wanted the burpee at a maximal pace, and then the medicine ball throws a recovery exercise, we would say, all right, I want you to do the burpee at a 9 out of 10. I want you to perform as many as possible, or your reps. The medicine ball throw, I'd say I want you to maybe a 5 out of 10. Okay, and that's the idea, is that we give them specific directions. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't, but at least it gives them a target to shoot for. All right, so that's kind of what we're looking for as we kind of bridge more into our phase. Now for our strength phase, you'll notice that the one thing that major change, or the two major changes that I made to our template, is that we added more filler exercises to account for longer rest periods for these strength exercises, but also now we're starting to look at a big difference between our main lifts and our auxiliary lifts. Our main lifts are very heavy in nature. Okay, they're things that we want to use progressive resistance for, and exercises like a squat, a push-up, and dumbbell presses, barbell presses, that we can progressively increase almost indefinitely, okay, what we call our main lifts, versus those in our auxiliary circuit, again, which are more endurance-based in nature. You'll notice that we kept it at 6 to 8 reps there. I like to keep it, for our auxiliary circuit, I like to keep it higher rep to kind of maintain some degree of endurance, but at the same time with our main lifts, we're really focusing on strength. That is the goal, and those are the focus of our session. So if I go up in weight in those two lifts, then it's been a good day. Generally with main lifts, we're looking from anywhere from 2 to 5 minutes of rest. So we have more filler exercises. So a plank with an elbow crawl followed by a Spider-Man. Okay, and those are the ones where, again, we coach the client to move slowly. Just make sure that they have that time versus jumping right back in, because we need to allow the body to recover a little bit more in order to really maximally exert ourselves. So that we start to make that distinction between the two. All right. For conditioning, you'll notice that now we are doing something like a 20-10, where the goal is to maximally explode, and we're choosing very basic exercises. And these should be things that, number one, are very, very simple to execute. All right, I'm not having my client do, say, a power clean in this exercise because there are too many moving parts. It's too difficult. We don't want them to. We're not looking for a lot of complexity there, right? An airdyne sprint, I know the client can do without thinking about it. A squat, I know the client can do without thinking about it, and that's something where they can maximally exert themselves on that task versus thinking about, oh, do I move this way or this way? So that's going to be the big change that we make. So for that, just like we only have maybe 6 main lifts that we focus on. With alactic conditioning, it's the same. All right, we're looking at things like rope slams, squats, airdyne sprints. We have maybe 6 to 8 exercises in our library that fulfill our needs in that way, and that's what we're focusing on. All right, these things don't have to be interesting; they just have to be effective and get the effect that we're looking for. So think very basic in terms of your exercise selection with these. So a sample workout. All right, what do we do over a weekly basis? All right, on Monday, generally we're going to perform our A workout, so workout A. On Wednesday we have workout B, and then on Friday we have workout A again. The majority of our personal training clients are going to work out 2 to 3 days a week. So if we're looking at the gold standard for our general population client, this would be, they're doing 3 days of strength training during the week, and then they're doing 2 days of either aerobic activity or recovery work, or actually up to 3 days. But the other thing that we do is that in week 1 we're going to go work out ABA. And then in week 2 we would go BAB. Okay, that way they're getting the same number of workouts in throughout the month. So we just alternate ABA, BAB per week. So some notes, some things to think about. With a technique phase, all right, all of our clients or all of our athletes are going through this basic technique phase, all right? And even when you're incorporating, or even for somebody that's been training continuously and you want to introduce a new exercise, all right, you might place a technique exercise into a normal phase, okay, or a strength phase, or whatever it may be, where you say, okay, we're starting a new cycle, okay, we're starting a new 8-week program, so I'm going to work on accumulation with this person, but I want to incorporate a front squat, so I'm going to use 5 reps versus 6 to 8 with this, and base this upon form versus trying to make it heavier. Maybe you do that for 1 to 2 weeks or whatever it may be, but that's kind of the way you can repeat that process without having to go through an entire phase of that. For new and deconditioned clients, people that are just returning to our gym, we're going through at least 2 weeks of this phase up to 6 weeks. All right, and that's the biggest thing, is that in this phase as well, the goal would be to do the bulk of our mobility and our corrective work. All right, so we have a beginner that is just starting. They go through a technique phase. The idea with the technique phase would be to train them to learn our warm-ups, to train them to kind of learn the protocols of the gym, and spend more time going through dynamic warm-ups, spend more time going through corrective stuff with them, just to clean up whatever issues that they have. And as we've talked about in our previous presentations, the dynamic warm-up that we teach our clients, the foam rolling as well, are going to correct probably, or going to at least help to, start to remedy 80 to 90% of what they have going on. All right, and we teach them that first. We spend more time on that. That could be up to 30 minutes of a session. Okay, and that is going to, because the program is simpler in the technique phase, it's only going to last probably 25 to 30 minutes anyway. So we take more time to accommodate those things, and then we prepare them for the more stressful phases to come. Now, in our anatomical adaptation phase, we're performing our exercises for reps or time. Okay, so this is where you do your interval training. This is where you might put your fat loss clients, because again, the goal is to build a general base of fitness. And the more fit somebody is, that's also going to help with lower levels of body fat and just helping them to get in great aerobic shape. All right, so we're going to scale based upon what the client can do. All right, so say the client is performing push-ups with their hands on a box for that phase. I'm more interested in their ability to maybe do more reps in the same amount of time at a decent tempo versus moving their hands down to the floor. All right, I want to make sure that they can perform this great technique that we worked on in our technique phase in a state of fatigue versus trying to make it heavier and loaded up and everything else. So in this way, we're kind of still working on basic technique, but now we're incorporating an additional stress in the sense that we're giving the client more fatigue. So the goal is to perform this skill in the presence of fatigue. All right, we talked about using this 2 up, 2 down tempo so the quality stays high. Just stop short of failure. If the client needs to break it up, meaning if their push-up starts to look like more of an inchworm when they get to the 30-second mark and we're doing 40 seconds, I would say maybe, okay, do push-ups for 20 seconds, come down onto your knees and rest for 5 seconds and break it up. That's something that I like to use with a lot of our clients. Rather than doing the full, I would rather them do maybe 3 good ones than 8 crappy ones. So we say, all right, just focus on going to technical failure, stop, recover a little bit, and then do it again. So that also sets us up for additional phases. For our accumulate phase, now we're getting more into strength loading. All right, so the clients are going to be given a specific rep range to either meet or subtract from. All right, the goal would be to add weight to the bar and then to adjust the rep ranges based upon adjust the weight based upon what they can do. All right, now what I want to emphasize with this is it is a general template. Okay, this is not, these numbers are not set in stone, and I want you to think about who you train. All right, because for some of your older clients, we might need to adjust the rep ranges up. Okay, for a senior client or for somebody that's older, maybe we're doing 8 to 15 reps. For a lot of our females that need more volume, okay, we're going 8 to 15 reps versus 6 to 8 reps, just because at that time they need it. Generally, with beginners, as they become more experienced, or we will say in the very beginning, these higher rep ranges are actually better in the sense that they load them a little bit better. They provide the volume which is necessary for adaptation. As the client becomes more experienced, they require more intense loads and lower rep ranges. So as the client gains experience and we put them back through these cycles, the accumulate cycle for somebody that's been working with me for a couple of years would be maybe 5 to 7 reps versus somebody who is new, which maybe is 8 to 12 reps or 10 to 15 reps. So it's not necessarily going to be this number, but I like 6 to 8 because it's right in the middle there, and it's something that will work for most people. For our intensify phase, now we're introducing our main lifts versus our auxiliary lifts. We're getting into true maximal effort loading, and this is going to be something that I think every client should do to some degree. I just think that, again, based upon who you're working with, adjust your rep ranges up and down. There's absolutely no reason why our 50-year-old personal training client should be doing 1 rep maxes, but at the same time, there's no reason why they can't be lifting things for 4 reps, and still building that strength. We want to keep the rep ranges high in our auxiliary circuit simply because we want to maintain some endurance. All right, we're using a mixed template in the sense that we're not, just because the phase is called strength or intensify doesn't mean that that's all we're working on. That just means that that's kind of the theme of the phase. So we still want to maintain our endurance, and we're doing that through just using sort of these auxiliary lifts to maintain that quality. We also use more filler exercises to account for rest periods in our main lifts. So our progression for the general population, okay, because we have people of all levels that we work with. And when I said, part of this presentation is being able to scale for various audiences, this is exactly what I'm talking about. So to me, a beginner is going to be somebody that really is truly a beginner. 0 to 3 months of training experience. I don't consider somebody that's been working with machines for a year to be anything other than a beginner. I don't count doing fitness classes such as spin and Zumba and things like that as a training stimulus. If they're working with a trainer that gives them random workouts, they're doing CrossFit, any of that, that's still random stuff. So when we say beginner, we mean spending time in a structured program where they are progressively increasing weight and things of that nature. With this client, generally we're going to spend maybe 4 to 8 weeks in our phase 1 and phase 2 working on technique. So we go through what we call a technique 1 and a technique 2 phase, and that's just introducing the exercises that we focus on in our training system. So in phase 1, we would do our basics, our push-ups, our squats, our inverted rows, and our deadlifts. And then in phase 2, we would begin to introduce or reintroduce some more exercises that we would put through the same technique phase, such as floor dumbbell presses, split squats, more single leg exercises, and then we could start to move into our anatomical adaptation phase. But because this person has never done this stuff before, we're going to take more time to teach them what they need to know, and we're going to load these things up after we've kind of introduced all of the elements that we want to use with our training. For our intermediate client, somebody that's been with us, or somebody that goes through this first sort of cycle here, where we go through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, then we're going to alternate our anatomical adaptation and our accumulate phases. Okay, this is good because for a fat loss personal training client, a lot of people are going to come to you. Majority of people will come to you actually with the goal of improved body composition. All right, and what you'll see is that alternating these 2 phases in particular are going to build both strength and it's going to get them into great shape. And the beauty, I think, of this is that they will see immediate changes or drastic changes in their fitness. The cool thing about the accumulate phase is that for this client who's only been training for 3 to 6 months, this is really a strength phase. I mean, these kind of loads are really all they need in order to gain strength. And I mean, we could almost do this indefinitely. For some clients, this will be their workout forever. Okay, and this is all some clients are ever going to need. So for those clients that have never strength trained before, really focusing on these two things, you're addressing fitness and then you move to strength and you just alternate between the two. So that's definitely a great way to go, and something that I use for a lot of my clients that I call floaters. Okay, with floaters are people that will come in and out that are not necessarily going to be, that'll be there for like 2 weeks and will be gone for a while, or might work out for like 3 months and then they leave on vacation. People that travel a lot. What I like about these two phases is that these people are going to be interrupted a lot. Their training progression is not going to be as good as somebody that's with you long term. So for them, I like to repeat shorter versions of our anatomical adaptation in our accumulate phase, because we're still working on conditioning and strength, but we're getting it in, in the time period that they have. So that might be a good example of somebody that you would use that with. For our advanced personal training clients, okay, somebody that's with you indefinitely, somebody that's with you for a long period of time, is a stable client, and you know that they will be there. Okay, then we're going to start to accumulate a little bit more stress. All right, with this, the gold standard progression that we use is going to be anatomical adaptation, where we work on fitness, followed by accumulate, where then we're working more on moderate loads and building some muscle tone and that sort of thing, followed by what we call our intensification phase. All right, so we go fitness, moderate loads, heavier loads, and we just repeat that process almost indefinitely. And I think for the general population person, this is the gold standard. All right, this can be repeated for for the foreseeable future and continue to get them results. And it's simple linear progression, meaning we start with light loads and more volume, and we move to heavier loads and less volume in the intensify phase. All right, we can repeat this to get our client into great shape for a variety of sports, for activities, as well as for body composition goals as well. So the reason that I didn't really focus much on with the general population client on, say, fat loss or specific things, is that this model will achieve all of those things. All right, and what I want you to think about is that we're coaching this person with habits, working on their diets at the same time. So based upon whatever that client is trying to do, we just kind of alter a couple variables in this model in order to achieve that. So the question though is that who are you working with and what do they need? All right, the things to consider with that are, number one, their lifestyle and the amount of stress that they have. If it's somebody that has a very stressful life, I would definitely err more to the side of this intermediate or even the beginner phase, and keep them there. All right, some people's just situation is going to preclude them from piling much more stress on. All right, so you need to be cognizant of that. If it's somebody that is maybe a mom that's not working, she has a lot of time, then she's going to progress pretty quickly. But if it's somebody that has a very stressful job, they're always they always seem like they're kind of fatigued and they're not sleeping, then we don't necessarily want to pile a lot of more stress on them. We want to use just moderate training to help them to work around these things. Age is going to be another major factor. We're generally, the general population, you're looking at people from the age of maybe 30 up to in their 70s or 80s even. And for our 30 and 40-year-olds, these moving them through this progression is going to be fairly simple. As we get into our 50s, our 60s, maybe even the late 40s, then maybe we find a spot in the middle and we keep them there. Again, with the personal training client, the goal is not to continue to add weight, as we'll talk about. It's more about getting them to a certain place and then working on specific goals. We meet a set of strength standards where we know that they have the strength to do what they need, and then we work on, say, improving specific things for their lifestyle. Obviously, their goals are going to be a big factor. Somebody that wants to lose a dress size is going to be much different from somebody that's preparing for a tennis tournament. But by the same token, all that really means is that we adjust their diet a little bit. We work on specific things, and I think lifestyle factors, meaning diet, what they're doing in their off days, have a lot more to do with that, with success for the personal training client, than does the workout. All right, so if we use this model here, they're going to gain strength, they're going to get in great shape, and it's almost it's very much secondary to the lifestyle choices that they make. So the coaching model that we've talked a lot about in this presentation or in this series is going to really take precedent over that. And number 5 is going to be the commitment level. All right, I talked about floaters. You get a lot of those, but the way this person commits or doesn't is definitely going to dictate what we do with them. If we know that they are a floater, they're somebody that is just going to come in and out, we can pretty much create a training program for them and just manipulate the exercises almost indefinitely, because that's all they're ever going to need. If it's somebody that's going to be with you for a long time, then you want to take a little bit more time and focus on that person. So just based upon what the client is doing. All right. And the next thing that we'll talk about is fitness testing for the personal training client. So we have basic strength standards that I've developed based upon my population. This is completely up to you. I don't think this is necessarily something that you have to do, but by the same token, I want a basic idea of where my clients are. And based upon many years of training, this is what I've put together in terms of what I feel is differentiates our beginners from our advanced clients. So with a push-up, for example, a beginner moving on to an intermediate would be somebody that can perform 5 good push-ups with technique. Okay, and I don't care about what surface that's on. You know, their hands could be on a bar, it could be on the floor, whatever. But I just want them to be able to do it well. Okay, the focus of our beginner phase, or training beginner, is to get them to be able to move better and just perform good technique. So then when we move into these more experienced levels, we can start to load them up a little bit more. So we're looking at 5 inverted rows, 5 split squats, which is good body weight form, being able to hold a plank, and so on. Once we get to our intermediate phase, with the intermediate client, now the goal is to build a base of fitness. Okay, so we have 15 push-ups with their chest to a surface. So now this is more, performing proper form in the presence of fatigue. So again, I don't necessarily care about what surface that is. What I care about is, whatever it's done with good form, it's done with full range of motion. All right, and it's the same really for everything. It's based more upon endurance, and with that as well, 30 split squats, 30 single leg glute bridges. I'm looking for more of an endurance effect with everything that we're doing. The one thing that you'll notice with the personal training clients, the leg exercises as well, is that we go as the client becomes more advanced, we go more to single leg exercises. All right, that's simply because with a personal training client, I don't know how realistic it is to back squat them and deadlift them and different things like that. I think moving to single leg exercises focuses more on, it reduces the load, it allows us to load them up with lighter weights, and there's good value to that because we're preserving them, we're increasing their strength, but at the same time we're doing so with minimal stress. So that's just something that I've done. Everybody's going to be different, but that's kind of my thing. In terms of cardiovascular endurance, you'll notice that with our beginner, we focus more on just a 6-minute circuit test, meaning I give them 3 exercises in a circuit. I ask them to perform as many rounds as possible. I don't necessarily have a certain number that I want them to achieve. I just want them to get through it. All right. For our intermediate, we have a 6-minute 30-30 test where I say, okay, I want you to do 30 seconds of hard work with a medicine ball slam or using the air dyne, followed by 30 seconds of rest. If the client can get through that, all right, I know that they possess the basic cardiovascular endurance in order to move on to more advanced stuff. So for our final phase, now we want to look at strength. Okay, and again, I think body weight rules the day for personal training clients. The majority of the clients that we train at Peak are females. All right, they are in their anywhere from, again, early 30s all the way up to 70s and 80s. So I think body weight is something that can be extremely empowering for a female who really has never done this stuff before, or even more experienced. So for an advanced person, my go-to standard would be 5 push-ups to the floor, with the chest to the floor, surely doing that. I mean, we have clients that do this all the time, but it's extremely empowering for somebody to get their chest to the floor for the first time with a push-up, just as it is to do a full-range chin-up for the first time. If you can get your chin-up, your female clients doing chin-ups, they're extremely strong, and you should be proud because you're a good trainer. Okay, that's something that, again, is gold standard for us. We start out with an inverted row, and then we move them to that. As far as split squats go, 50 pounds in the goblet position with a dumbbell is what we consider to be our gold standard. As far as the anterior core or the abs, we have a stability ball push forward where their elbows are on a ball and they're pushing forward. For hip dominant, we have a trap bar deadlift, all right, and what we like to use is their body weight. Okay, I like single leg exercises for. We use a lot of single leg deadlifts, single leg glute bridges, but we also use what we call hip lifts and trap bar deadlifts, where the client's on their back with a barbell on their pelvis and doing glute bridges. That's a double leg exercise, as well as the trap bar deadlift. If they can deadlift their body weight, they're pretty strong. Okay, and most of our females that have been training with us for a while can do that. So that's how I know, though. And for that, for our final endurance test, we have what we call a 6-minute Cooper test, where they just run as far as they can for 6 minutes at a high heart rate. Okay, and generally this is going to be performed at what we call the anaerobic threshold, where they're the top of their aerobic heart rate. All right, and that's what I want, is for the person to be able to endure these very high heart rates, and survive. So if they can do that, I know that I can expose them to some pretty intense stress via interval training. But what I personally find value in with these standards is that they give me an idea of where the client is, all right, and they allow me to place the client in the right phases in order for them to be successful. And again, they dictate to me, for some people they will never achieve our advanced standards, and that's fine, because that gives us an idea of where they need to be with their training. But for those that are advanced, all right, it allows us to know, all right, and adjust their training. The next question that I often get in terms of progressing clients is that what are some ways that we can change phases and make things harder? Because inevitably, when you do get clients that have been with you for a while, we're going to have to change some things in order to keep them interested and move them along. Number one is that we add an extra workout. So we have workout A and B. With more advanced clients, ones that have been training for you for a while and know our basic movements, then we can start to incorporate more training variety. So oftentimes we're going to do a workout A, B, and C. So rather than doing A, B, A during the week, they would go A, B, C, and that's the way it happens. What I also like to do with my more experienced clients is undulate their rep ranges. Okay, so rather than saying we're working on 6 sets, a set of 3 sets of 6 to 8 reps for each day, naturally on our Monday they're going to be stronger, so we say Monday would be what we call strength day. All right, so even when we're in accumulate phase, we could use heavier weights, and the goal for that day would be to maybe do 5 to 7 reps or a little bit heavier rep range in order to progress. Okay, we could then say, okay, Wednesday is going to be what we call light day. Okay, where we don't necessarily try to add weight to the bar, but we say, okay, we're using the same rep ranges, we just use a reduced load. Okay, and this kind of accounts for more. This accounts for the client as they progress. All right, the goal for a beginner client for about the first maybe year, 2 years of training is just to add weight to the bar for every session. Okay, it's called progressive resistance. But once this stops, once the client becomes stronger and they gain more, they improve their ability to train and to stress their body's going to inevitably need more recovery. So it's not necessarily realistic to say, let's just try to pile on weight with every session, because they don't recover soon enough in a 3-day split to do that. So we might have a heavy day on Monday, let them rest on Wednesday, where we work on just lighter loads and work the form, the technique, and that pattern, and then weight them up again on Friday. Okay, that's kind of how it happens, is that as the client becomes more experienced, they require more recovery. So this undulating rep range starts to account for that. So if your client is plateauing in weight, where for the first maybe 3 to 6 months or however long you're training them, they were able to add weight per session, and then they started to hit these plateaus from session to session, incorporate a light day in the middle of the week, or if they're a 2-day client, have day 1 be their heavy day and day 2 be their light day. What I also like to do for clients whose goals are body composition is split the workout up. Okay, so rather than doing, for a personal training client that's starting out, we might do a total, where they do total body workouts with each workout. All right, as they gain experience and as their body develops, then we start to split up their routine to focus a little bit more volume and intensity on certain areas. So we would move to something like an upper-lower total split. Okay, if our client's goal was to get into physique or bodybuilding, then we might go upper, lower, and then we could even start to move into push-pull and body part splits where we're working out for 5 days. But that explains why we don't want to necessarily start with body part splits. The simple fact is that for a beginner, they don't need that level of intensity yet. Okay, and doing that is just they'll achieve results with that for a while, but they'll plateau on it. We want to do the minimum amount necessary for them to get the result that they need, so we can pile on stress later as they become more experienced. So the body part split is definitely a worthwhile thing for changing the person's body and making them look better, but we want to keep that in our toolbox until that's absolutely necessary. So we just progress through this basic idea of just adding an extra day and splitting their workout up as they become more as they become stronger and they become more efficient. Now, the big caveat that I want to add with this is that this split thing where we're splitting their workouts up, this is for a client whose goal is body composition or getting into maybe physique competitions, that kind of thing. This is not something that we're doing for athletes. All right, athletes are generally going to stick to total body workouts or upper lower body workouts. So these first four, we go total, 3 totals, upper lower total, and upper lower would be our athletes. Okay, because generally an athlete's not going to need to work out more than 4 days a week. Their sport is their focus versus the physical development of their muscles. So keeping the client interested, the art of a personal training session, what can change versus what stays the same. For me, mobility drills, again, teach them the basics in the beginning and then vary the patterns up. So we teach a basic inchworm where the person is in place, and then we could add complexity where maybe we add a push up to it or something like that. Vary the patterns up so they appear to be different, and they are, but don't necessarily change the pattern. We'll incorporate new ones every 4 to 8 weeks, but we try to teach the basics first. With technique work or power work, again, it's the same idea. We introduce new drills every 4 to 8 weeks. We have our main lifts, which again are going to stay the same. We'll vary the pattern every couple weeks. Generally, we're looking at 3 to 4 weeks, but again, we want to keep these fairly similar because we want to gain strength in them. With auxiliary lifts and conditioning, these are the things that can change. Okay, we can either change these per session, or we can change. We can sub lifts in the same category. All right, we actually want to change these things because we want to keep the body adapting. With auxiliary circuits, I like to keep the exercises in the same category and pattern. So rather than doing a push-up on the floor, maybe the person is doing a Spider-Man push-up or an inchworm push-up where they perform a push-up and then they do an inchworm. Again, it's the same basic pattern, but we vary it up and make it different. So that's something that we can do with every session. There's no problem with that at all. With conditioning, we want it to be different. We want to use different exercises because we want this to be as inefficient as possible. We don't want the body to adapt, all right? So we're going to use different things to prevent that. So, as far as breaking down the art, keep the first 3 things the same, all right? We're teaching technique, mobility, and main lifts. Keep those fairly similar. Auxiliary circuit and conditioning, you could change those all day. That's not a problem. In terms of progress and variety, with our auxiliary circuit, you'll notice that with push-up and a bodyweight squat, all right, so we have the basics in week 1. So say we're working on just the basic technique in that first week. Client has that down. We can go shoulder tap push-ups where I come to the ground, I tap the opposite shoulder. I can do a goblet squat holding dumbbells. Week 3, I just change the leg position of I'm pulling my knees to my chest. When I get after I get my chest to the ground for the push-up, and I'm holding a bag. So with with upper body exercises, we can often we can change things such as extremity movement. We could do both arms pulling together. We could have one arm alternating versus the other arm. Whereas with lower body exercises, oftentimes holding different implements such as a bag versus a dumbbell or kettlebells to the side or whatever it may be. Good way to change things up and kind of make things different. For conditioning, what I like to do is I'll have a week 1 and 3 workout and a week 2 and 4 workout when we come to things like time circuits and then even interval circuits. So you see in the conditioning in week 1, we've got a certain three specific exercises, and that we repeat that in week 3. What I like to do with that is that I will have the client repeat that workout during the week, and we challenge them to do better. So we say, okay, you got 4 rounds in this week. Now, the goal would be to beat that number. So it creates a little bit of competitiveness, and it allows us to kind of light their fire. Okay, whereas with our 30-30 intervals, we simply change modes. Okay, we have an air dye in 1 week, we have a medicine ball slam, we have a treadmill push. And again, we could even do the same thing for our 30-30s as we do for our time circuit. We could repeat something like medicine ball slams in week 1 and week 3, and we could say, all right, I want you to count your best number that you achieved in 30 seconds and write it down. All right, the goal would be to beat that number in week 3. Creating a little bit of a competitive situation for our extroverted clients is a good thing, because it lights their fire, and again, it gives them incentive to work as hard as possible, and that's what we want with conditioning. So as we progress our client along, we go through, we're working on their fitness, we're working on getting them in great shape, but we're also working on progressing their level of adherence and taking this stuff out of the gym. All right, and this is the 80% thing that I was talking about with our personal training client. Number 1 is that we want to teach general before specific, and we want to reinforce whatever we're giving them as homework with each session. I find that it's very much a time progression, in that in the beginning, personal training clients are willing to spend very little time on themselves. All right, they view their workouts as what they're doing for them, so they don't think about doing things really in their off days. All right, and we want to plant that seed, because that's going to be extremely important in terms of consistency and just getting them better results as they go along. What I like to do in the very beginning is start with basic, very, very short 10-minute little mini bites. Okay, we give them short 10-minute workouts, all right, short 10-minute mobility routines, just things that allow them to fit into their schedule. I've never heard somebody say that they can't devote 10 minutes to something. So have them do their dynamic warm-up as a workout at home. Okay, that's their 10-minute circuit for the month. At the same time, we're working on habits-based coaching, okay, for their nutrition. Or for just in general, setting them up for success. Or we ask them to list out, the things that we feel that are disconnecting them from their goals, and we simply pick one thing based upon what is easiest to change at that time. Generally, I'm focusing on things first that have to do with consistency in the gym, such as attending workouts, eliminating scheduling conflicts, and things of that nature, and just getting them to do things in their off days before I start to focus on nutrition. So my biggest thing is, if I'll pick one thing, okay, such as I want you to do your 10-minute circuit at home every day. Okay, and it needs to be a 9 out of 10 in order for them to buy in my experience. So if I ask them, are you willing to do 10 minutes on your off days? Well, it's about a 6 out of 10. Okay, what about 5 minutes? Okay, yes, that's a 9 out of 10. Okay, shrink that change down to whatever that can be done for that time, and then if they can do it for 2 weeks, then we move on to something else and we work down this laundry list of things. Once the client becomes an intermediate, okay, or once they kind of reach this level in terms of coaching, okay, we start to target specific needs, such as basic endurance, more targeted recovery work, because at this time, now the client has bought into the fact that, okay, it's okay to devote a little bit of time to myself in my off days. So now we can start to say, all right, I want you to focus on jogging for 30 minutes, okay, or I want you to do 30 minutes of this specific mobility routine, or whatever it may be. The client is bought in at that point, and they will reasonably be expected to do what you say. For nutrition, we're looking at clean eating, all right? So we give them a flexible meal template, and we say, all right, for breakfast, we have 2 bullet points. We have 1 protein serving and 1 serving of veggies, okay? So we have a list, we give them a shopping list of 20 choices that they can choose for protein. So it could be anything from eggs to veal to pork chops, whatever, and we say, okay, the serving size is this. For veggies, again, that could be almost anything, and we just list 40 examples or whatever it may be. So the client still has optimal variety to plug in whatever they want. All right, this just gives them a little bit of structure. At the same time, we're working on habits-based coaching, focusing on their nutrition. So a good example would be to say, okay, if this person drinks 6 Cokes per day, maybe we say, all right, is it possible for you to drink 3 Cokes a day? Oh, that's about a 6 out of 10. Well, what about 4 Cokes a day? Yes, I could definitely do that. That's a 9 out of 10. And just think about, again, easy, simple changes that we progress along once they meet that habit for 2 weeks. As our client hits this advanced level, and some people will never get here, that's what I want you to realize. This is the gold standard for people that really make substantial and maintain substantial changes. For your clients that are looking for something specific, that are maybe getting to figure fitness competitions or athletes, this is where we want to go, and this is where our clients that buy in ultimately will end up. And by this time, client has some discipline. They're willing. They know the deal in terms. They've cleaned up their basic habits. Now we can start to incorporate some more advanced methods such as carb cycling, pre and post workout nutrition, ketogenic diets, things that require a little bit more thought and a little bit more time to put into these things. As in terms of an off-day program, we can give them whatever we want, basically targeted things that deal with their specific needs. But again, I want you to think about looking at your clients that are training and where they will end up on this continuum. It is unrealistic to think that everyone will become advanced in terms of their habits. Oftentimes, client will get much more physically advanced than they will with their adherence out of the gym, and that's okay. All right, these two things don't necessarily live together. All right, the lifestyle and their fitness are two different things, but this way we account for both, and at least we're doing something. So if the majority of your clients can get to this intermediate situation where they're doing clean eating, they're giving themselves time to do things in their off days, that's where we want them to be. Okay, that's going to get them in great shape, and that's going to get them their goals. But again, we always want to put this component in, because this is the key to selling our work with who we train as a long-term proposition versus a short-term fix. So key takeaways, okay, what we want to get out of this presentation. Always establish technique before we load the exercise up. All right, I'm looking for excellent movements in my technique, in my anatomical adaptation phase, before we start to make things harder. Once we get to our accumulate and our intensify phases, progressive resistance rules the day. Okay, we're simply looking to add 2 to 5 pounds per session, and for the beginner, we can do that for even a number of years. We utilize our technique phase to teach basic movements and establish best practices, and then we increase just the basic complexity as we go along. I want you to think about sticking with basic exercises versus making things that interesting. With personal training clients, there's definitely an art to that, and we talked about that. But again, we want to let the basics rule the workout. That's the key, is that the basics are the things that are going to drive us to become better, and that we can revisit and make harder and more complex throughout the entirety of as long as they train with you. And so we cycle between phases and we make minor changes. All right, so we might have our client go through the anatomical adaptation, the accumulate, and followed by the intensify phase, 1,000 times. The variables that we change in those workouts is that we change the exercises, we change hand positions, we make minor changes, and we progress them along. All right, so it's a progression. Each phase should flow into the next phase versus making huge changes that the client's not necessarily going to be used to. So use similar exercises, introduce maybe 2 to 3 new exercises per cycle. Make it different, but again, the basics are always going to be the best thing, and they're always going to help our clients to progress along. So, think of this as variations upon a theme versus changing the theme with each song or with each cycle. All right, and those are the key takeaways. Hopefully this gave you a good idea of how we program. And our next presentation, we'll talk about specific